Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Granville Guitars World Headquarters here in lovely St. Petersburg, Florida, on this fine December morning. This morning, for this latest edition of 20 Questions with Scooter, we have our good friend, Mr. Albert Castiglia. Good morning, Albert. Thanks for coming
Good morning, Scooter.
We appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Yeah, Albert is a very fine player, singer, songwriter. Has a new album out on Rough Records called Big Dog. And we're pleased and proud to have you here today, Albert.
It's an honor to be here.
All right, let's dive right in. Discuss your earliest musical memories.
I guess I would have to go back to when I was seven or eight, and my dad had an 8-track player in his car. And it was the first time I heard the Beatles. It was the Beatles live at the Hollywood Bowl, and that's my earliest musical memory. It was a great record.
I remember that one.
They just reissued it. I hope they reduced the screams. There were a lot of screams. The girls were screaming in the background, and I dug up. I found a cassette tape on eBay, and I bought it, and I forgot how loud the girls were screaming over the band, but it made a big impact on me, I think, subconsciously. Yeah, it was definitely that moment I heard the Beatles. That was my earliest, yeah.
Who or what compelled you to pick up a guitar?
Well, my uncle played. Played, and he was living at my grandmother's house, and he used to have little jam sessions. Him and his friends would come over and they'd jam and stuff. And I think that's what first compelled me. They were always having a lot of fun, and that's what I think that was the first exposure to it that motivated me to want to play. And so I started messing with his guitars. He had acoustics mainly. He didn't really play too much electric. He had an old Yamaha acoustic that I loved, and I think he sold it or something. I never saw it again after my teenage years. I never saw it again, and I wished he'd have kept it because it was like the best playing acoustic I'd ever put my hands on. But that was my I think him jamming once a week with his friends kind of intrigued me, and seemed like a lot of fun. And then I got into it through him first, and then he taught me about 3 chords, and then he'd show me songs within the 3 chords. A lot of Hendrix. You can get away with playing Hendrix with 3 chords. Or Grand Funk. He taught me Heartbreaker by Grand Funk. That was one of the first songs he taught me.
That's a good way to start.
Yeah, and of course Smoke on the Water.
Oh, yeah.
And the Stairway, the intro to Stairway. That's usually how it works. Dylan, Bob Dylan too. Got into Dylan through my uncle. And so it was like the rock guys, the rock and folk guys I got into in the beginning.
That's a heck of a way to start, man.
Isn't that how all middle-class white kids get into music, I guess? Pretty standard story, common story.
You'd be surprised. My route to those artists was way more twisted.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Well, there was Beatles in my household, and my mom had an absolutely beautiful singing voice, and she would sing around the house, mostly standards and Johnny Mathis and stuff like that. Yeah, but
my dad was a big Stones fan.
Yeah,
he liked the Stones, but my dad's a major square.
Yeah,
but he liked the Stones. I think that my parents their song was Satisfaction.
There you go.
It's an interesting song, wedding song. That was their song.
My wife Angie is actually named after the Rolling Stones song.
Really?
It's not short for Angela. Her name is Angie, after the song. How cool is that?
That's real cool. Could you imagine if they named a kid Slobber from Cream? I would be crazy if they named the kid. You remember that song?
Oh yeah, I remember it. It's been a while.
Rainbow Has a Mustache.
Yeah, I remember it.
Could you imagine if somebody named a kid that? That'd be
I
awesome.
bet somebody has.
You think?
In a world where kids are getting named Apple. Who was your main guitar influence? Both then and now, maybe. Possibly two.
Well, I think I've come to discover that major influences change with time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But early on, man, it was Clapton.
Yeah.
Clapton was the first one that really made an impact on me.
What era of Clapton really grabbed you? What was it that he did?
The Blues Breakers stuff. There was a period, actually, the album that got me into blues was an album he did in 1980, late 70s, early 80s, called Just One Night.
Mm-hmm.
It was a double live album at the Budokan.
Yeah.
And 90% of the material on the record was blues. So it was, people they always, when you talk about Clapton, that's the common question, or the common topic that's brought up is like what your favorite period is. And I liked elements of every period. Mm-hmm. Even the terrible years he went through with the heroin, and people thought he didn't give a damn, there was stuff from that period that I loved.
Mm-hmm.
There's not one period of his career that I don't like. I haven't listened to it. I listened to Old Sock, the last one, and it's pretty cool, but okay, so it was that Just One Night album, and then after that album came along, I got into the Beano record, the John Mayall record with Clapton, mm-hmm. and that was like, wow, this is really good stuff. I got into like Otis Rush and Bobby Bland and Maceo Merriweather and Junior Wells, and through that that album I mentioned, Just One Night, and then when I got the John Mayall record, I got into Freddie King because of the John Mayall record, because they did Hideaway, and so it was through Clapton that I got into the blues.
Yeah,
that was the introduction into the blues. If it wasn't for Clapton, I wouldn't have gotten into blues. So Clapton was my main influence. In fact, when I was a kid, I tried to dress like him, because in the 80s, he was wearing those cool, designer suits, those white Italian suits. So I'd go to like whatever those, what was those, merry-go-round, those trendy stores, and look for and I bought a cheap copy of an Italian white suit. Sometimes I'd walk around like him. He was that big of a deal to me when I was a kid.
I think it would please Eric very much if he knew that a player of your caliber was. He opened the door for you to the blues. I think that would make him very happy. You
think? Because I don't know. I would. He's the one guy I would love to meet, mm-hmm. and hang with. But I've been let down by some of my heroes that I've met over the years, and I'd hate to think I'd like to keep the image of him as how I got it, how I got it of him now.
Save the mystery.
Yeah, man, because I don't know. I doubt I doubt he'd pee on my head if my hair was on fire. But he meant a lot to me. He really did back in those early days. Uh-huh. And even more so than Hendrix, and I worship Hendrix. Mm-hmm. He was the greatest, but I think Clapton's longevity, the fact that Clapton stuck around long enough to create this incredible body of music is why I put him at the top.
I think the most compelling thing about him is that, from all accounts, he's a very sort of reserved and private individual in his personal life, but out on the stage and in his songwriting, he exposes the darkest, deepest parts of himself.
Yes.
Something like Tears in Heaven, that everybody knows what inspired that song. And here he is, he's sharing that very personal, intimate feeling with everybody.
Or Layla.
That's the compelling thing.
Or Layla.
Layla. He was
or the
tortured
stuff.
when he wrote that.
And the Derek and the Domino stuff was very, very powerful. That was very impactful on me. That was like, man, he bared his soul on that, and that's how I think that influenced me in my songwriting. Writing about what's true in your life, writing about what's real in your life, is what's going to make a song effective. I think if you're just writing bullshit out of the air, it didn't come from anywhere. I don't think it's going to make as much of an impact as if you're writing something that you're living through. And he sure did that. I mean, there's one song. What's that song he did with Derek and the Dominoes? Got to Get Better in a Little While.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's when he was going through that drug stuff, and man, what a great tune.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to gush over him, but he's...
Well, I mean, that's the purest element of the blues, is bearing your soul.
Yeah.
I think, you know.
Yeah. Oh, and I learned that later on as I started getting into the people that influenced him. You know, and then Muddy Waters came after that. When I first discovered Clapton, I started getting into the blues stuff. And then I started buying, you know, B.B. King records and Otis Rush records. And Buddy Guy is like my favorite, you know, pure blues guitar player. But I bought my first Muddy Waters record. Because Clapton always cited Muddy Waters. So I went to this store when I was 15 and bought this Muddy Waters record, Hard Again, that Johnny Winter produced.
Yeah.
And that record changed my life.
That's a good one.
Oh my God. I was 15 and it was a cassette. And the cassettes back then, they didn't have the credits. They didn't list credits on who played on the record. And I always assumed certain players play on it. But man, what a band! But it starts off with that just him singing, you know, like, whoa, yeah. And I shit my pants, man. I ran under the bed when I first heard that that hulking man just freaking just belt that out. And then the band came in, just the rawest shit I ever heard, man. It blew my fucking mind. And I was growing up in the 80s. And there wasn't a lot of great shit coming out back then. I mean, there was some stuff of substance coming out, but it wasn't really being heard. The real substantial good stuff wasn't really being heard. I thought Bruce Springsteen was great, but it was a lot of poppy shit. I listened to a lot of really good hard rock. But, you know, even with the hard rock, as a kid, I didn't look the part to be in a band, to be in a heavy metal band. I loved heavy metal. I loved rock. But I couldn't grow my hair long. My hair would grow. My hair would grow. When it grow up, and I looked like a Lindsey Buckingham and Eraserhead had a kid. That's what he looked like. I had this fucking beehive hairdo. And you know, I didn't have an ass to wear spandex, so I didn't look good enough to play heavy metal and hard rock. And you know, those are the people I hung out with. But they didn't see a lot. You know, I didn't see a future in that. And then I discovered the blues, and it spoke to me because I felt like it spoke to me, even though I was a middle class white kid from the burbs. But I had this alienation. I felt alienated. I didn't have real. I battled with self-esteem a lot, and my lack of self-esteem was really bad back then. And that shit, the blues just spoke to me. It was like, man, you're not alone. You know, it spoke to me. Even though my struggle wasn't nearly as bad as the people that wrote these tunes, but I felt the connection to the genre, and so it was pretty much Clapton was the guy who introduced me to it, and Muddy Waters was the guy that solidified my path.
I think that's important what you're saying, because I was reading an interview. I think it was with Bonnie Raitt just recently, and she said the importance of the blues is that no one knows your struggle like you. And part of the blues is to try and relate that to people, because everybody can understand
Sure.
it. No one knows your struggle except you.
And it's not just about the struggle, it's about conquering the struggle. That's what people get to have this misconception about the blues, as it being a negative. Oh, it's so negative, it's so down. No, it's about triumphing. It's about being triumphant over your circumstances, and that to me, I always viewed it as one man's fight against the world and surviving and living through it. So that I love the blues, and Bonnie's right about that.
I think that was her. I think it was her neighbor. Next question. That was really good. Thank you for that. Have you ever been influenced by non-guitar based music or players, keyboard players, drummers, sax players, anything like that?
Absolutely. Ray Charles.
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder. The drummers of the world. I mean, John Bonham, Ginger Baker. Singers. Ella Fitzgerald. Yeah, you can be influenced by. You don't have to be limited to being influenced by a guitar player if you're a guitar player. You know, I find that it's funny. I'm glad you asked that because people ask me all the time, ask me about my influences, and I get specific with certain influences, but I think I'm influenced by any type of music that ever gave me the goosebumps. You know, that ever made the hairs stand up on my arms. You know, I'm influenced by everything. I can get just as much of a rise out of Steely Dan as I can out of Stevie Ray Vaughan. So
I'm a big Steely Dan fan.
I love Steely Dan.
Love the Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Steely Dan. I love Billy Joel.
Mm-hmm.
And people, it's been cool now, I think, to not like Billy Joel, but that was one of the records I pulled out of my uncle's record collection with songs songs from the Attic.
Yeah, that's a good
that live album. Holy crap! They all they know is Uptown Girl. Everybody wants to judge him by Uptown Girl or all that the stuff that he went middle of the road poppy, but that early songwriting period of his in the beginning, man, was great stuff.
Yeah,
I'm not ashamed. There's just so many. Music is just such a wonderful thing, and it can come from so many different sources. It's not limited to guitar with me.
absolutely right. Good answer. I'm going to expand on this question a little bit. Describe the local music scene where you came up. And what I'm talking about is wherever you were when you were first starting to gig regularly and get a little pocket money, where was it? What were the clubs? Who were the players you were playing with when you were first becoming a musician?
Well, Miami, Florida is where I started out playing. And there was a good scene back in the late 80s, early 90s. I started playing in bars when I was 18. I wasn't really playing in bands, but I was playing at jams and stuff. I felt like there was still a lot for me to learn before I could jump into playing in bands. I did a little side, I'd do session, I'd play with people, but I wasn't in a solid band situation. It took a couple of years before I was into that, but I watched a lot of great players, a lot of great bands. The Iko Blues Band out of Miami. They were the house band at Tobacco Road for years and years, and I learned a lot from them. There's a Lynn Noble, great singer with his deep voice, this real deep, rich voice. She was great. This guy named Pat De Leon, guitar player, was in the a band called Woody's Orphans. Ron Wood from the Stones owned a bar on Miami Beach called Woody's on the Beach, and Pat was in the band, that the house band, which was Bobby Keys' band, the sax player from the Stones. So he would run the jams and he'd play shows with these guys, and he had a band, a great band, and Pat was the guitar player in the band. And after, that was done, he was in a band called Woody's Orphans. He's a great guitar player, singer, songwriter. Real tough cookie, tough guy. I remember the first jam session I ever did on Miami Beach. I was singing Further On Up the Road, and he just walked up there and physically bumped me off the stage. He just kind of rammed me over and started singing it. And very intimidating guy, but I learned a lot from him. And I think the most important lesson I learned, one of the most important lessons I learned was from him. Well, it was the most important. It turned out to be. He told me vibrato is what's going to get you gigs. If you don't have a good vibrato, then you can't be a good blues player. You ain't shit. And that was an important lesson, because years later I got the job with Junior Wells, playing with him, touring with Junior, and his road manager and his nephew Michael Blakemore told me a few years back that that was the reason he hired me, was because of my vibrato. And so that lesson has been a lot to me. So he was a big influence. Graham Drought from Iko Iko, the lead singer, was a big influence on me, songwriting wise. He carried himself as a professional, and I learned a lot. His professionalism rubbed off on me. Lots of great bands, man. It's a great scene, back then, and it took them a while to accept me, but it was a great scene back then. And then I went off in the late '90s to play with Junior Wells, and I came back to Miami, and it was kind of not the same. You know, people weren't so much into the blues in Miami anymore. Everybody kind of, after Hurricane Andrew, I think a lot of people just split. There was a population dip after Hurricane Andrew, and a lot of these people that left, I think, were like roots music and blues lovers. Because now Miami's a big Latin music, house music, electronic music kind of scene, and the scene kind of moved upward to Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach County. There's more of a scene up there now, but Miami had a real good scene back then, back when I was a kid.
Cool. How'd you get the Junior gig? How did that come about? Tell
We
us
had
that story.
we had a mutual friend in Miami, Gloria Pierce. Junior was real close to her, and see, December 31st, 1996, I get a call from her. She says, "Hey, Junior's playing over at the Back Room in Delray Beach. You want to go see him?" I said, "Yeah, we'll go see him." "Yeah, let's do it." She goes, "Bring your guitar." And I said, "Well, all right, but I don't want to push it, so just don't push the issue. I don't know him, and he doesn't know me, so don't push the issue." So we got up there, and she told me that she told Junior that I played, and then he'd like me to jam with him. I said, "Great." When we got there, she told me. And then I met Junior for the first time, and I shook his hand, and he goes, "Mr. Wells, it's an honor to meet you." And he goes, "Don't call me Mr. Wells. You could call me two things. You could call me Junior, or you could call me motherfucker." And I said, "Okay, Mr. Motherfucker." And he goes, "Not Mr. Motherfucker, just motherfucker." I said, "Cool." So he did his first set, and during his first set, his road manager came up to me, Michael Blakemore. We became really good friends since that day, and he just passed away a couple of years ago. He walked up to me and he said, I said, "I heard you play guitar." He goes, "Yeah." He says, "Well, Junior gonna bring you up, but you better be good, because if you're not, he's gonna embarrass you on stage. He don't take no shit, and he don't want no jive-ass musicians up there." I said, "Okay." I said, "Look, man," and I've been working at the welfare office. I was working for a Department of Children and Families, and fucking hated that job. I was a caseworker, dealt with food stamps and Medicaid. And I said, "Look, man, I just worked a 12-hour shift at the welfare office." I said, "A bad night with Junior Wells beats a good day at the office. So whatever he does to me ain't gonna be. He could say something about my mother, and it won't bother me." I said, "Let's do it." So I started the second set happened. I got up with the band. Junior didn't come up yet. Usually a band would open up with a couple of tunes, and Junior would come. So I did like 2 or 3 songs with the band, and then Junior came up, and I did like three or four songs with him, and it was awesome. It went really good. I remember being cool. I got off the stage. It was cool. I stepped outside, and then I ran up to a payphone and called my parents to tell them about it. And they didn't know who Junior was, but they were happy for me. And then, so I thought that was the end of it. I went back to work a few days later, And then I got a call a week or two after that from his Junior's road manager. He said, "Hey, can you come up and do a few dates with Junior, just to fill in?" I filled in for the guy I wound up replacing. I filled in, did Buffalo, Cleveland, and Detroit, and I flew back home. Went back to work. Didn't think anything of it. I got a little cocky after that. I thought, man, maybe I could do this full time. Fuck this job. I don't like this job. So I took a couple weeks off from work, thinking I could line up some gigs, and if I lined up enough gigs, I could tell the boss man to go stick it. But it didn't work out that way, and so I went back to work a couple weeks later, and I was hanging out at my parents' house, and they called my parents' house. I gave them contact information. Junior's people had my number at my apartment and my parents' phone number. And I get a call at my parents' house. Or I might have been living with them. I might have moved back in with them. I'm not sure. I get a call from Junior's people. I was face down in my couch. I remember I was kind of depressed that this whole gig thing wasn't working. I wasn't picking up enough gigs. And then I get a call from Michael Blakemore, Junior's road manager, and he says, "Hey, man, can you move to Chicago? Can you be in Chicago in 3 days?" That's how he said it. Not can you move to Chicago. He said, "Can you be in Chicago in 3 days?" And I go, "For what?" He goes, "To play with Junior full time." And I said, "Let me think about it." I said, "I'm ready to go." And I said, "No, I'm just kidding. I'll go." I dropped everything, man. I think I had a gig with a rock band I was playing with. And I did one gig on a Saturday or something. And I think I was on a plane on Monday. Mm-hmm. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know where I was going to stay. I got on a plane, flew to O'Hare in the middle of April of 97, and I forgot that when April in Chicago is weather-wise very different from April in Florida. And I showed up in O'Hare Airport with a pair of shorts and a tank top, and it was 45 degrees.
Oh, no.
And I showed up. I had a cousin who just got married. My cousin just got married. And I showed up at his apartment, and they weren't really thrilled to see me. I said, "Hey, man, hey, cuz, can I crash out at your place for a couple of days, for a couple of weeks or something? I find something." And that lasted one day because they lived in a loft. And so lofts don't have, the walls don't go up all the way.
Right.
So I had a bad snoring problem back then. I still do, but I snored, and my cousin was like, the next day, he was like, "Man, you can't stay here, brother. Man, I can't get no sleep. My wife can't get no sleep." I said, "No problem, man. I'll be all right." And I went up the street to this transient hotel called the Hotel Belmont. It was right off the Red Line with the train, just like the Blues Brothers, man. The train ran every 20 minutes outside the window of the hotel. The hotel was a real shithole. It was something out of the Blues Brothers, man. They had it was a transient hotel. Mm-hmm. It was full of hobos and whores and crackheads and it was $20 a day, and I stayed there for a week or two, and I looked out my window. I had a little TV with a little wire hanger for an antenna, mm-hmm. and I had to share the bathroom with the room next door. Nasty fucking place. I looked out my window. I go, "Man, this is awesome. It's the greatest day of my life. I'm a Chicago blues man, This is fucking awesome." I was so happy, and I got settled in. I had another cousin that lived in town. He felt bad for me, and I stayed at his girlfriend's place until I got settled in, and I got settled in nicely there. And it was from that moment, the moment I was staying in that shithole hotel, I said, "Man, I'm never going back to working in a welfare office. I'm never going back to doing a job I hate. Life is too fucking short, and I'm never going back to that. This is all I'm going to do. And I don't give a shit. It's about me this time. I'm doing this." And I went through some bad relationships because of it. Mm-hmm. Because being a musician is hard. Yeah. Being a broke musician is even harder. Yep. On a woman. So, it wasn't, it was a sacrifice, but it was worth it. And I'm doing great now because of it. It was a great time back then.
Discuss some highlights of your playing career.
Wow, there's so many. But I remember when I was, the very first one was when I was 18, and Woody's on the beach, Ron Wood's club on South Beach, was having an open mic jam, and I mustered up enough courage to go over there. Problem was, it was a 21 and over club. The doorman was like, can I help you? I said, yeah, I come here to jam.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, how old are you? I said, I'm 18. I said, well, you can't come in. I said, come on, man, I just want to jam. I'm not going to do anything. And I pleaded with him for like 5 minutes. I begged him, please let me in. I just want to jam with Bobby Keys. And he said, okay. He said, I'll let you in. If I catch you drinking, I'm throwing your ass out. I go, yes, sir. I was like the beaver, you know. Mm-hmm. I was real innocent and naive. Okay, sir, okay. I was like timid, real timid, you know. I promise I won't drink, sir. I won't. I promise. And I get in the bar. And I could have sworn I saw Iggy Pop when I walked in the door. He looked like Iggy Pop, and he was living down there at the time, I think. I saw Iggy Pop, yeah. It was pretty cool. And then, so there's a whole bunch of jammers, people twice my age, much older than me. And they rounded us up. We hung out in the VIP area, VIP bar. Bobby came down. Come on, everybody, let's go upstairs. It was a stairway. The bar was a converted old Art Deco hotel. So there was a stairway that led to the roof top of the hotel, of the bar. And we got up there, and there were these two big-ass tubs of beer. These big tubes, chests, ice chests of beer. And Bobby Keys said, have a beer, son. And I said, I can't, Mr. Keys. The doorman downstairs said I couldn't have any. And he goes, fuck that guy, have a beer. So I said, are you sure? And he goes, yeah, don't be a pussy. Go ahead, have a beer. Go on, around. So I had a beer with them, and I drank, and I felt like one of the guys. It was really cool. It really put me at ease, being up there. And we hung out for a little bit. We went over what songs we were going to do. And he goes, what song you want to do? I said, I'd like to do Key to the Highway. Oh, great. That sounds like a plan. And we get down there, and we did Key to the Highway. And that's how, I mean, Clapton was that big of an influence on me. You know, that Derek and the Dominoes. I said, that Key to the Highway. And Pat DeLeon was there, and he was hip to Clapton, so we did that. Of course, we all know it's a big Bill Brunsey song, but it was Clapton's version that got me into the blues. So we did that version, you know, and did a few others, some standard blues, and that was like, at that time, was a highlight of my life. 18 years old, and I'm playing with Bobby fucking Keys, the man who toured with the Stones, who threw that TV out the window with Keith, you know, I mean, I felt really good. That was a pretty awesome moment. And then time went on, and I got the gig with Junior. That was a highlight. That was another highlight. I could have died. I said, man, I'm a blues man, so that was a cool thing. And a few months after I got the gig with Junior, we do the South of France at the Jean Le Pont Festival in Antibes, I think it was. It was in a town called Juan Le Pont. And it was near Nice. It was near Nice, on the Riviera, and we did this festival. It's a well-renowned jazz festival. There's like an Ella Fitzgerald recording. It's like my favorite recording ever of her playing with Duke Ellington there. So this festival has been around for like 50 years, 50 or 60 years, and they had a blues night, and it was Junior Wells Band opening up for B.B. King.
Oh yeah.
And we opened up for B.B. King in the south of France. And the Riviera in the ocean was behind the stage. And I got to meet B.B. King. And we had dinner with him and his band. That was a highlight.
I'd call that a highlight.
I was shitting my pants, man. I was like, man, a few months ago I was peddling food stamps, and now I'm here with Junior Wells and B.B. King. It was quite a mind fuck. It was a pleasant mind fuck, but it was a mind fuck nonetheless.
It's all
I couldn't
right.
believe it. It was really surreal. And just subsequently, there was just moments after that where were just, you know, I mean, let me tell you something. to this day, I still have great moments. I mean, I got to write a song with Cyril Neville last year.
Yeah.
That's on a record.
Mm-hmm.
I got to record at Dockside Studio in Maurice, Louisiana, where Junior Wells had recorded his last 3 or 4 albums. I made a great record, the best record yet, with Mike Zito producing. It just never ends. That's the great thing. That's probably why I do what I do. That's probably the biggest reason I do what I do, is for the memories and the moments.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it helps that I'm making a living at it. That's a big reason, but the moments, man, you just can't.
You get to take those with you.
Oh, those are invaluable, man. They're just they're the greatest. It's great to have those memories.
Yeah, those are.
I wish everybody could have memories like that.
That's awesome. Thanks for that.
No problem.
Albert, are you proficient on any other instruments?
No.
No.
I did mess around with some bass,
Mm-hmm.
and I played. Damon Fowler came to see me play at Aces.
Oh yeah, I saw
Last
the pictures.
week.
Yeah.
And we didn't have an extra amp, but I wanted to play with Damon, so I said, "Hey man, just take my guitar. I'll play bass."
Mm-hmm.
And I faked my way through it, but no, I'm pretty much all I can play is guitar, and I can barely play guitar.
Now don't make me argue with you.
Well, I just work. I'm learning now. As I've gotten older, I've got more of a thirst for knowledge these days. I've been woodshedding a lot more. In the last 20 years, I've never felt I really had time to woodshed. And then running my own band. Well, when I was a sideman, I was partying a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I ran my own band, and that became a full-time thing, and that became a real. Running a band is really, really hard. And when you're in the search of finding guys that are on the same page with you, that do this full-time, I didn't have that for a long time. I had guys who had other interests, and I had to shuffle schedules around, and running a band it's really hard. I don't have that problem now. I got 2 guys that do this full-time.
Tell us about them.
Jimmy Pritchard, bass player from Newcastle, Delaware, who moved down from Delaware to Fort Lauderdale to play with me, and Brian Menendez, a great drummer from Tampa, Florida originally. He lives about half a mile from me now, and it's the Monster Rhythm section. They're just great. They really and they're game for rehearsing, and it's been great, and it's freed me up to not worry about other things. Having to worry about who's going to play bass with me this week. Who's going to play drums with me this week? And I spent a lot of time doing that tedious shit.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't have that kind of thing anymore, and it's freed me up to woodshed a lot more. And I really I'm definitely I'm getting better now. I'm getting better at the instrument, I feel.
Well, I think it's interesting to me. Some of the best musicians I've ever met, and I would place you in that category.
Thank you.
Frankly,
Thank you.
Profess to have some insecurities, and yet when I hear you play, the one word that I hear in my head every time I hear you play to describe your playing is confident. You play with a surety and confidence, like you absolutely positively know what you're going to do before you get there. That's what I hear when I listen to you.
Well, that's where Junior Wells' influence came to play. It's funny, we were talking about people that influenced me that weren't guitar players.
Mm-hmm.
When I hooked up with Junior, Junior Wells is a harmonica player, folks. So just let you know. But before I met him, I was really timid. I was kind of timid. I was kind of a pussy. I kind of had this approach that the 2 biggest things I learned, learned 2 valuable lessons from him. One of them was that there's more to playing than just playing. I just, when I was in bands before I met Junior, I was just kind of in my own world playing. It was not because I was an arrogant asshole or anything, or I was conceited. It was just that I thought that's all the people wanted from me. I just play your guitar and, just don't worry, just focus on that. But when I started touring with Junior, you know, I found out that you have to connect with your audiences. You have to make your audiences feel like they're part of the show. You have to. You gotta engage the audience, and he did that by being vulnerable and opening himself up to people on stage. You know, he just had a knack for doing that, for connecting, and that was a big lesson I learned from him. And but the biggest, well, he taught me how to be fearless. That was a big. He got up there when he was on stage. He played and performed like he didn't give a shit. He didn't care. You guys ain't better than me. I'm the fucking man. He just had this confidence about him, you know. And it's like, man, I want to be like that. He was just like fucking tough, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He just had this air of badassery, and I wanted to be like that. And so and that's how the guys in Chicago were, pretty much. They had this confidence about them, and you had to be tough, or else your throat was going to get cut. If you go up there on stage and you don't show like you belong, you're going to get slaughtered. You can get your head cut. So I learned a lot. Yeah, I learned about that confidence thing. He helped me get that somewhat. I still have my insecurities. We all do. Don't let anybody fool you. It don't matter if it's me. I'm not gonna name names, but there are guys out there. I'm not gonna name names, but I mean, there are people on TV now that play, that walk like, you know, act like they're the only Coca-Cola in the desert, but they got insecurities just like everybody else.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You got to go up there and you got to be confident, you know. And I learned that from Junior.
Other than what we've talked about already, talk about a turning point in your career. And what I mean by that is a very clear monolith where there's before that and after that, and that was just a very, very clear, sharp point, like almost a crossroads in your career.
Crossroads in my career.
Yeah. Something where nothing was ever the same again. And maybe you didn't even know it at the time.
Well, it has to go back. It has to go back to the Junior Wells meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the time I met Junior, I was playing in bars for 10 years, and I always had the hope that I would get out of that situation I was in.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there were times where it was really bleak. I said, "Man, I'm just going to be a social worker for the rest of my life, playing nights, doing this shit," you know. And that meeting, that introduction, totally changed my life. If he hadn't opened that door for me, who knows what would have happened? I would have probably left the welfare office. I was not liking that job at all. But I might have spent my life doing something I didn't like just to pay the bills.
Well, and it's hard to walk away from that kind of security, too. I worked for the state of Kansas for 8 years, so I know exactly where you were, man. You get locked into that security, that, you know.
Yeah, it's the benefits thing. You know, my dad's old school, you know, and he was like, you know, if you do something, you need to stick with it. And I think I might have stuck with that job a few years too long. But I put up with it because that's the way I was raised, you know. You got to work. Mm-hmm. You got to work in this world. And but that thing changed my life, man. I mean, it was real. That was the big crossroads. I'm trying to think of other moments. Moving back to Florida from Chicago was a big moment. Mm-hmm. Because ever since I was 14 or 15, all I ever wanted to be was a Chicago blues musician. I wanted to live in Chicago and play blues, and that's where I wanted to stay, and I didn't want to ever leave.
That's a great town.
It's a great town. It's the best town in the world.
Yeah.
It's like New York, only smaller and cleaner and friendlier.
Yeah.
But but it was really hard making a living there. After Junior died, he died in '98. He died a year after we met, and then I bummed around Chicago for another three and a half years, and it was really hard, man, because there were a lot of established musicians there, a lot of guitar players that had a lock on all the gigs. So I was kind of surviving, but I would have had to have lived like a fucking hobo if I'd have stayed there. And so there came a point where I had to move back to Florida. And when I moved back to Florida, I felt like a failure. I really did. I felt, man, this is not how I had this planned. I'll go back. And back then the scene in South Florida was kind of iffy. But what choice do I have? I don't have a support system up here anymore, you know. Junior was the guy who looked out for me, and he's not around. And it's time to go back to Florida, go back to Miami. So I moved back to Miami. And little did I know that it was the best move I ever made. Because I went back to Miami, and it was just at the tail end of things happening there. Where the blues scene was kind of tailing off. But like I said, the blues scene kind of migrated north to Broward County and Palm Beach, and I found myself playing up there a lot. And I was like, man, this is going really well. It took about a year or two. I was living with someone, and that ended really badly. So I wound up moving in with my parents. And I was with them for about a year. And and things were real slow. And I remember my dad was getting frustrated. And he's like, man, you need to get your shit together. If you're not working 3 days a week with this fucking music thing, you got to fucking go.
Okay.
and like right out, like a week after he said that, gigs started coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, and he, so he likes to think that he was the great motivator or something. About if for him, I wouldn't have gotten these gigs. No, I was working hard. It just took a long time for me to build up these gigs. Right, a week after that, he gave me that talk, that coming to Jesus talk. The gigs started rolling in, and I started working regular. And then I built a following, and that following's been with me since 2000. To 2000, because I was living in Chicago, but I was splitting time between Chicago and Florida. But then I had to move back full time. Mm-hmm. So 2000, 2001, I've had a following ever since then, and because of that following, I have the things that I have today. And then I met my wife, too, and who's very supportive, and so. What I thought was a terrible move wound up being the best move I ever made, both personally and professionally. If I hadn't made that move, who knows what would have happened? But yeah, I'm doing great because of that move. So those were the two pivotal moments, the two crossroad type moments, I guess.
That's awesome. I'm gonna skip over a few of these questions because you've really answered them.
Okay.
We talk.
Good, because I gotta pee.